Okay, welcome back. Maria Magdalena Makarenko, we have known each other for I don't know how long. It is many, many years. So I'm so happy that she is here also this year. Maria is a doctor in psychology, clinical psychologist, psychotherapist, EMDR consultant, trainer, and supervisor in psychotraumatology, including IoPT. With over 20 years of experience in clinical practice, she specializes in trauma and psychological trauma therapy. And since 2013, she has been offering advanced training in trauma courses in psychotraumatology. Her areas of professional interest include post-traumatic stress disorder and complex PTSD. And for many years, she has been involved in research. And this is what she wants to share with us today. And some of us have heard you speaking here earlier, Maria. And I am really looking forward to what you will present today. So warmly welcome.
Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. It's so nice to be here again. Today, I will present the results of the first randomized controlled trial about the efficiency, the influence of the IoPT on Hashimoto disease activity. Some of you may remember that in 2020, I have presented the preliminary results of this study at the Congress. But what is different now is that, meanwhile, this study has been published. So I am happy to share with you the final results and conclusions. First of all, Okay. First of all, what is Hashimoto disease? It's the most common autoimmune and endocrine disorder. What is an autoimmune disease? It's a condition in which the immune system attacks the body's own tissue. In this case, it attacks the Hashimoto, the thyroid gland, leading to progressive thyroid dysfunction. This illness frequently is associated with psychological symptoms such as depression, anxiety, stress, fatigue, and cognitive impairment. Is more prevalent in women, and there is no cure for the disease, only hormone replacement therapies. Why study Hashimoto through trauma lens? Research to date suggests that childhood trauma may have long-term influence on the immune functioning, on the immune system, leading to or contributing to the immune dysregulation, inflammation, and autoimmune process. Also, dissociation and alexithymia, those are two survival mechanisms to trauma, has been identified as being mediators between childhood trauma and the autoimmune diseases. meaning that those two mechanisms and not trauma itself may contribute to the development of the autoimmune disorders. So, we wanted to study, because, you know, we already know from research and practice that trauma integration can have an impact on the psychological functioning, and a good impact. But we needed to know if trauma integration may also have an influence onto the body by reducing psychological suffering and by reducing chronic stress. And to find out, we randomized 70 outpatients into two groups. One group received treatment as usual, and the other one, IoPT plus treatment as usual. The experimental group further divided into 5 smaller groups. We did 10 IoPT modules, 1 module every 2 weeks, so the participants received, or they worked, 10 intentions. What happened in the IoPT sessions? The initial instruction was that the intention should be formulated focusing on the illness or related symptoms. And later, intentions gradually shifted towards the trauma behind the illness. We find out that there is never a single trauma behind Hashimoto illness. Hashimoto, it's a chronic disease, and chronic diseases often involved chronic traumatization. Of course, we have found sometimes big T trauma as trigger for the illness, but the vulnerability, the deeper vulnerability was already there because of the developmental trauma behind. We also found out that there is almost the entire traumatic biography behind. But the 2 main entry points into this traumatic biography were trauma of love and trauma of becoming a perpetrator. Also, we found a high level of suppressed rage. And we know that suppressed rage is often chronic. It means that it begins in childhood. So I know that a child cannot manifest healthy anger towards the initial perpetrator, who many times is the parent. So in order to preserve the relationship to the parent, the child is repressing the healthy fury and directing this fury towards self, meaning that the child is taking the aggressor in. So there is a lot of loyalty behind this illness. Also, and this is not a characteristic for autoimmune diseases, but it's a characteristic for trauma. It's a consequence of trauma. The participants didn't recognize part of self as being self. They didn't recognize the survival mechanisms, or they didn't recognize the trauma part especially, or even the healthy part. So exactly like mirroring what is happening inside the body at the biological level when the immune system don't recognize what is mine and what is not mine, and I need to defend myself in front of everything. What were the IoPT effects? First of all, we observed a significant decrease at follow-up for dissociation and alexithymia, which means the participants were more in contact with their inner experiences, their emotions, and also they could put emotions into words, and they knew better what is going on inside themselves. The similar results we obtained for depression, anxiety, and stress. So at the end of the study, participants were more stable in their emotions, and they felt less chronic stress. A significant decrease in anger, in state anger, which is acute anger, contextual anger, is the reactivity towards anger. The trait anger is the propensity to react like that. It's a chronic trait most of the time. And the anger in is to direct this anger to ourselves. So is the suppressed anger. So at the end of the study, the participants declared a less reactivity for minor stress, for example, but also they didn't aggress themselves in the same way at the beginning. And it means also that during the process, during the study, something else was changed. It was also changed the self-compassion. And self-compassion, it's a sign for healthy functioning. Also, we obtained an increase in the quality of life. They declared a better functioning, a better daily functioning, a better emotional functioning, a less internal conflict, and also a less external conflicts. They were more in contact with their vitality, and they enjoyed life better. Also here, and this was the very interesting results, because in a way we expected to that decrease in the psychological variables, but we didn't know. Of course, we hoped. We found something in this biological mark for Hashimoto. The initial statistical analysis showed that the thyroid peroxidase, which is one of the antibodies characteristic for Hashimoto, this decrease at post-treatment and maintained the results as follow-up. So this result is I don't know, we can hope for further replication, but we need to interpret cautiously, because those results were not replicated after we added further statistical verification, because you needed to do that. So there is hope, but in the same time we need to replicate those kind of studies in larger trials, because one of the causes of this biological instability of the results could be the sample size, could be the dropouts, so the attrition, but also the significance of the chronicle settle of the immune system. There are so many things happening there and involved in this chronic illness. But why did improvements appear later? Because we saw the results become visible more at follow-up and not at post-treatment. One of the explanation, one of the reasons, could be the sleeper effect. Sleeper effect, it's a well-documented phenomenon in psychotherapy, where the benefits of the intervention could be seen after treatment ends or after session ends. So sometimes a therapeutic process could look like that. Nothing happens, nothing happens, nothing happens, and then a sudden gain. And this is not uncommon. The psyche may require time for integration, restructuring, and emotional differentiation. But also another. So sorry, I also had another. I still worked on this, and I forgot I sent it already. Another explanation of the why did improvements appear later was the psychological intensity of the process, because they worked one intention at every 2 weeks for 5 months. So this may be quite intense for the psyche. So the psyche needed another 3 months to settle the information and to really see what is happening there. How can I restructure all the information? Because IoPT is very rich in the information that we received. And also because we talk about a lot about identity trauma. So when a person doesn't know what is mine and what is not mine, what is my reaction, or is this just an identification? And this takes a lot of time to settle this information. Because, yes, again, integration takes time. Another striking thing was the trauma profile of the participants. Over 90% reported multiple childhood trauma. And this is not the single study with those numbers. Also last year, we published another study on trauma intervention, also on Hashimoto, we intervened with EMDR. We had 3 groups, EMDR, placebo, and treatment as usual. And the placebo group reported 100% of multiple childhood trauma. The other 2 groups, over 93, over 95. So those numbers make us think, right? It invite us for reflection regarding the connection between trauma and Hashimoto. And also, we as mental health professionals, but also the doctors, we should screen for the history of trauma. And we should screen for dissociation, because when there is trauma, there is association. So, or at least to work together on that. But those numbers are saying something that most of the time we don't look at that information, at that reality. Of course, we had limitations. First of all, the small sample. Although the power calculation said that there is enough sample to obtain meaningful results, still a small sample is vulnerable to high attrition, to high dropouts. And this happened to us in the treatment as usual group. We lost a half of the group because they started psychotherapy or they started psychiatric care. And this further highlights the severity of the symptoms, the severity of the psychological sufferance behind the Hashimoto. And of course, high attrition made the antibodies so unstable, because this was very sensitive to the number of the participants. So therefore, first of all, the replication is essential. I hope this will not remain the single randomized controlled trial on IoPT, but further, we need to find some ways to improve participants' retention, especially in the groups that for 8 months, for example, don't receive anything but the treatment as usual, or they receive nothing in waiting list, for example. Hey. Something is here. So, in short, IoPT, when added to the standard care, may offer psychological benefits for Hashimoto patients and could potentially influence immunological outcomes. Why this study matters for IoPT? Because it's the first randomized controlled trial, because it was published last year in a High Impact Trauma Journal and the European Journal of Psychotraumatology, because it offers scientific support for long-standing observation in our IoPT workshops, and also because it opens a bridge between psychotraumatology, psychoneuroimmunology, and autoimmune medicine. Right? It's important. It's a connection. And of course, Final thoughts? The body may carry what the psyche could not integrate. So, if we can help the psyche integrate the trauma behind, there may be a hope for helping the body and maybe some illnesses. Thank you so much.